I'm Cycling. Today I want to share with you my ultimate AURABOT guide, not only covering the very tanky CI version, but also the little bit less tanky, but being able to fit more auras low life version. I've played both, I can confidently say I know how to play them, and I think my guide will be able to show you how you can play them as well. Now, very quickly, before I head into the guide, I need to mention a few things. This is a fairly bigger guide compared to my other videos, so it's going to be a bit longer, because I'm not only covering the low-life version, not only the CI version, but also the late-game version, which is the final variant, the high investment, that just is able to take almost everything in the game. And because I have a lot of information in the video on the screen, I will hide my camera from time to time so you can see everything. Alright, and the final thing is I have, of course, let me put it differently. If you have any question, feel free to ask, be it on my Discord, in the comments, on the spreadsheet where I enabled comments. Anywhere you can contact me, feel free to ask questions that you have about AURABOT, but chances are that I might be able to already covered that question in the passive building. I have several leveling trees, so for every stage of the leveling, starting at 13 points and then being the first one exception, then every 12 points, including the AURABOT swap, I have the detailed trees for low life, the detailed trees for CI, and the final min-max version of the tree. I have the different skill setups for the different stages according with the different item sets, and I have a detailed note section not only including a detailed leveling setup where you get what, how you get what, but also other things like how you roll your flaws, aura priority, or the different flex slots and where they're good for. And finally, those POB is set up to calculate the damage and survivability based on a pinnacle boss, so that it reflects our survivability in a very juiced and endgame environment. So for normal environment, our EHP is bigger than it says in the POB. Alright, so before we get I know, I'm adding a lot in front, but one final thing, and I'm so excited to share this, I had to put it in here at this moment. AURABOT got buffed, and I'm really excited about this. The last few patches, AURABOT's been fairly just nerf after nerf, survivability nerfed, reservation efficiency nerfed, aura effect nerfed, just they threw nerfs at us. But now, finally, we had a leak with no overall nerf to AURABOT. They removed the conquer efficiency and potency, but they added something that more than makes it, more than evens it out, makes it even better. And there are three things we got. Actually there are four things. So three new things, and of course reworked passive tree and aura setup for me. We are now having, they removed Conqueror's efficiency, but they gave us the possibility to roll reservation efficiency for mana on rare jewels, and that is huge. Whenever we are leveling and don't have enough levels to get a full cluster in, but we have the jewel socket, we can just use one of these rare jewels. And they are different stages. We could just have the reservation efficiency for mana, we have the reservation efficiency and a percentage energy shield, which is a very valuable stat for us. We get to why later on. And we have access to corruption, which gives reservation efficiency for life and mana. And that's just huge, because we can fill that on several slots in transitioning phases, and late game we can still use it. And again, reservation efficiency and percentage ES is huge for us. The next thing we have are the sanctified relics. 3.20 gets us relics that have the potential to roll aura effect, allowing us to get more easily higher aura effect to get to our 90% max rest and capped aura effectiveness. On top of that, we have a chance to get keystones there, so we could get cool keystones like Mage Bane, like Chaos Inoculation, or Zealot's Oath, and it has increased AoE, and we saw some other stuff, so there is potential that it also has preservation efficiency, which would be gigantically huge. If you imagine just having free preservation efficiency and aura effect. And now the final thing, there's Smite. Vol Smite is a better version of Smite. Yeah, it's one more wall skill. We are already fairly tight on wall skills, but most of them we don't really want to use all the time. So, but wall Smite we want to. Wolf Smite is basically giving us a smite effect, and we don't know if it stacks with regular smite. So it could be that we have Wolf Smite Aura and Smite Aura, being additional aura which get with our aura effects for the Ascendancy, for Necromancer and Guardian. Just so much potential. And even if not, it's still more damage for our carry, which is always a good thing, because if it's more base damage, it gets better with aura effect, which means more damage overall. Perfect! Alright, everything out of the way. Now finally, let's get into the guide. To the guide. There's a question, go low life or go CI? I think CI is a very, very beginner-friendly version. It's tanky, that you can do some mistakes, you are focusing more on survivability auras. So if you are new to aura botting, if you want to take a casual approach to the league, or you want to reach a high level, the CI version is going to be a really good fit. Now, if you already know, you have played AURABOT previously, you know exactly what to do, you have huge goals for the week 1, you want to do bossing day 2, mapping day 3, be in the super juiced mapping as quick as possible, the low life is going to be better. The downside of the low life is that you won't be surviving as much. You have less ES, you have less armor, you have less evasion, so it's just overall a bit more squishy. But for that, you can fit 2 additional auras, which is 2 offensive auras by that, which is actually huge for the damage department. So I think low life, even with the flask downside, it's not really that much more complicated once you know how to set it up. And then you can always just swap to CI when you have enough investment, and just drop the aura when your carry doesn't need as much damage anymore. And you're good to go. And by the way, the endgame, the min-max version, is CI. So we basically can just say we are low life just to fit more auras, and later on, when we don't need as much auras, we go CI, and we then tank the game and deal a ton of damage, or well, let our carry deal a ton of damage. Okay, now for the next thing, the Pantheon and the Bandits. The Pantheon is always a choice, and we don't really need the freeze immunity, because most of the time either we or the carry are going to use Purity of Elements. However, if that's not the case, we can use Soul of the Brine King to get freeze immunity with the second vessel, and we can use the first and third vessel to have just general better survivability. And generally, either way, we want the Brine King Soul, so that we have can't be double stunned, because we are in ES, and especially on the low life version, we get stunned from time to time. So with the Soul of Brine King, we can't get stunned if we be stunned recently, so we only can get stunned once every 4 seconds. The other Soul is Soul of Aberrath, just to be able to use the vessel and ignore Burning Ground. As for the Bandits, we want to get rid of all of them. Now we get to the Ascendancy part. The Ascendancy is, on the first lap, we're not really getting much. We are passing to the Witch, so we just get a bit of intelligence, and we're getting a passive point. But starting with the second lap, we're going to get access to Necromancer, allowing us all our auras to give increased attack and cast speed, which is just huge. It's just so much attack and cast speed, because it does scale with aura effect. Then we have 1 Ascendancy point remaining, which is going to be either spent on the Strength Intelligence node here, or the Dexterity node here, based on what you are. If you're low life, you get the Dexterity node, because on your third lap, you want to get Pathfinder, so that you have Flask Recovery, which means that you can actually use the CI Flask. Oh well, it's not CI, it's Corrosating Elixir, it's Chaos Damage Cannot Bypass Energy Shield, but I keep calling it CI Flask. In the final lap, you want to get the Witch starting point, to get another 2 passive points, well, 3 passive points, 1 here and 2 from here. And on the CI version, you want to take this node to get Guardian in the third lap, which gives you reduced physical damage for each aura, which again scales with aura effectiveness, and just a few other tiny quality of life stuff, like if you have enough party members or minions around you, you give Onslaught to you and your carry if needed. Just a few nice things on the Guardian Ascendancy. And on the fourth lap, we can then take the Witch start. Now on the endgame version, on the min-max version, instead of going for Guardian or Pathfinder, we want to go for Champion. We're going to again keep Necromancer, because Necromancer is just that good. We're going to take Champion for the aura effectiveness, and we're going to take the Champion start, because we're going to path down there at the Duelist side to get Champion of the Cause allocated normally, so we free our anointment, and we can even fit more aura effectiveness in the way how we're going to get later. As we're going to keep having Guardian, but we're going to use it via the Forbidden Flesh and Forbidden Flame jewels, so that we have then Necromancer, Guardian, and Champion as our final Ascendancy setup. Next, for the passive tree, I'm not going to go into very much detail here, just a rough overview of what we are having. You can see the passive building, it has every detailed information that you need, and you can just take a look at the passive trees there, as well as it in between stages between end of campaign and medium budgets. Now, the most important things on the low life passive building is that, of course, we're taking all the aura effect and all the reservation efficiency, plus the life reservation efficiency mastery. We are going to take energy shield a bit off on the tree, and we're going to take a bit of flask duration. We need this cluster or will wheel with flask duration and the mastery that gives utility flask and additional charge, so that our CI flask is up all the time. And we need this chaos reel to get the chaos resistance, because we are not CI anymore. Well, we aren't CI at this point, so we need to have a bit of chaos res, and we can get blood immunity here. Rest of the tree is again just energy shield and aura effect, utilizing militant phase and natural instinct to get even more aura effect, and intuitive leap here to save 3 passive points. Other jewel sockets can be filled with the reservation efficiency ES jewel or eraser efficiency corrupted ES jewel. As our clusters, we are going to take reservation efficiency 25% clusters. We need 5 at that, and we're going to take Forbidden Flame, Forbidden Flesh, which is optional at this point, but later on we want to have it, so it's always a good investment to get. For the CI version, we need 7 25% clusters. I think it was 6 25 in one normal, so we can fit all our auras, but rolling 25 isn't really hard, so you can just always roll it when you get one. We want all of them with 3 passives. Of course, we're picking up CI, we're freeing up the Chaos Rest and the Flasks here, which allows us to even spec into the reservation efficiency cluster over here. And the rest is pretty much the same. Forbidden Flame, Forbidden Flesh being optional. We can, if we have it, we can already pass to Champion. If not, we just stick to Guardian. We don't need that, and can fit the rest with the jewel sockets with Energy Shield and Reservation Efficiency. The endgame version is now, the screenshot's getting a bit smaller, but it's definitely worth it, because we are getting access to the Champion down here. Oh well, with the Champion to the Duelist start. We're going to directly go for Champion of the Cause, and we can do something additionally. We can get access to this jewel spot here, which has a ton of Elegant Hubris, which gives us 36 to 48 aura effect, which allows us to get to the capped 90% max res. Just really a big. Which brings me to one big point that I think not a lot of people have done yet. With I think two leagues now, we have access to all the timeless jewel seeds, but nobody really been a compilation of all the AURABOT jewels. So I made a better trading import, or well, better trading trade list that has all the jewels, and I wanted to share it with you. You can just go on my Discord, go into the support FAQ channel, look at the pinned message if somebody posts questions there. For now, it's a button question, but maybe going to be a few more questions there. So I made it pinned, and just take it, import it, and now you have all the jewels as well. And there isn't even downside to it, because the trader already know all the seeds. So they already know them, snipe them, and put them up for a big price. But now you have the chance to snipe them too. Or you can just buy them directly and don't need to use a secondary market like the Forbidden Trove. Alright, now we get to the interesting part. We get to the skill setup. We are going to use Smite, and in the low life version, all the defensive hours plus 2 offensive hours and haste. So we have Smite, Grace, Determination, Discipline, Defiance Banner, Purity of Fire, Purity of Lightning, Purity of Ice, Precision, Clarity, and Vitality. On top of that, we're going to use Haste and 2 offensive hours of our choice. Now, we could use 3 offensive hours, but in my experience, having access to Haste is just huge. On top of that, we can use the Wall version to fit it in our Vault Carriers gloves, so it has more level. On top of that, we have 1 flex slots. There are a few flex skills we can use based on the situation or the content we are playing. I'm going to share those with you after the different skill setups for the different variants. Another thing that we can use is Bone Offering Desecrate, which I learned is absolutely huge. Bone of Ring gives us so much ELP just because of the blocks that we get from time to time. And it really adds up a duration of a juiced map. Also, we have Molten Shell, and in combination with the Defiance Banner, Aura Effect, and Determination, it's a 10k. We don't even need old quality for that. We can even use War Molten Shell to have an even more uptime. Just one note here, don't use War Molten Shell unless you absolutely have to survive. It has a huge cooldown time for the soul gain prevention. In that duration, we cannot use Wall Discipline, which is our most broken survivability access. And finally, we also want Leap Slam and faster attacks. With Leap Slam faster attacks, we get access to a really great mobility skill. However, there are people that don't like it, or for some content it's not really needed anymore because it's a bit more slow paced. You can always just use Flame Dash instead, and then use an additional flex slot. Or you could use Shield Charge, faster attacks, and then instead of a flex slot, use Flame Dash. For the CI version, we are dropping Haste and an offensive aura, or 2 offensive auras and keep Haste, and use more flex slots. The CI cannot fit as many auras, which is obvious because we don't have life as an additional pool to preserve stuff. However, it's again, we are just focusing more on the survivability side with CI. And finally, in the endgame version, it's basically the CI version, just that we regain 1 offensive spot and trade for 1 flex slot. Which finally brings us to what are the flex skills. So we have the following. If your carry is a dot build, we can use Wither. Or well, Chaos dot build. We can use Flame Link if the carry uses fire and you are actually doing good on the survivability terms. You can give the carry additional flat fire damage. You can give situational additional fire damage with Flame Wall. If you're bossing, you could use the Stormblast Mine with optional Divergent quality, because the Stormblast Mine applies an increased damage taken aura. So the enemies take increased damage, you just roll the mines at the boss takes increased damage, it scales with your aura effect, and then the carry deals a ton of damage, and the boss is dead. Or you could use any curse in case your carry doesn't apply the curses, you could apply the curse with maybe even the new support gems that allows if an enemy is killed, the curse spreads to all nearby enemies. Then, if you need survivability, you could use a rejuvenation totem, which allows you to have a ton of life regen. Rejuvenation totem scales with your aura effect, has a quality to have more aura effect, and basically is a better vitality, just that of course it's stationary. We could also link a custom damage taken to our Molten Shell to have a more AFK setup, maybe when running Blight or you need to manage other active skills so you can't manage to activate Molten Shell. And of course, you could also at any time replace Bone of Ring Desecrate with any of the flex skills. However, I highly recommend against that. It is doable, but Bone of Ring is just so good for the block, so good for the survivability. And now we get to the gear section, and here I need your feedback. I'm going to be a bit more speaking about the gear section. I'm going to show a screenshot of the gear, I'm going to talk about the items, and you could take the passive building and read along what the items do. And I'm just going to be here speaking about the items and how we use them. So for our low life version, there's one very important item that we need that is a bit expensive early on, which is a Prism Guardian shield. Prism Guardian allows us to fit auras on our life without them costing more like the Arrogant support does. So this allows us to fit a lot of auras on our life without really having to pay extra for them. We just need a bit of life reservation efficiency and we're good to go. Other aura stuff is our Alpha Soul, which can fit our purities and gives them +2. When we get a +2 and then we get a 21 purity, we get access to the better max res. We use the Victorious Influence for our offensive auras, giving them a high level generosity, which rivals a Awakened generosity, just not giving them +1. We also get more aura effect, the same for Jinx Juju, giving us more aura effect, and some Chaos Burst, which is definitely needed on the low life version. We want for our energy shield, we want an Ephemeral Edge and Syntrack, as well as some rings, which can also cover the rest of our resistances. And for the belt needs to be rolled with any tier of Flask duration, and then OK tier of either Flask charge gained or reduce blast charge use, so that we have a permanent uptime on the correlating elixir. Final item are the gloves. Here we have access to the wall carriers, where we can fit wall skills, so wall auras, and it should be fairly cheap, so we could even get a +2 duration, +2 AoE, or +2 aura on it. Rest of our flask, I already mentioned the correlating elixir, which gives us that chaos damage cannot bypass our energy shield, allowing us to not need a chevrons, so allowing us to use the victorious influence. We have an overflowing chalice, giving us better uptime on our jade, granite, and amethyst flask, and also combined with the correlating elixir and the passive tree, the passive on the passive tree, giving us a good uptime on that, or well, permanent uptime. Now, a lot of people are scared away from low life because of the flask setup, but from my experience, done the flask setup properly and checking that the uptime is permanent, the only thing you need to do is when you are loading in a map, the first thing you do is click on the correlating flask elixir to end your immunity phase. If you first move, there is a small time before flask is used when reaching full. Like, I think it's a second or second and a half, and then it's going to be used, and then it's going to be up permanent. If you just click on it, it's going to be up permanent, and it recovers on alone. For the suffixes on the jade, granite, and amethyst, I recommend having armor and evasion, obviously, because survivability. And lastly, either you're going to take the ignite immunity if you're running access that has ignite and your carry doesn't use purity of elements, or you can use reduced curse effect if your carry is using purity of elements. And if you are afflicted with corrupt blood, you have the mastery for that, and normal bleeding, you can just stop moving for a moment. On the top of, sorry, I clicked on my mouse. On top of that, we also have access to Laser Shade against the bleeding or dots in general. Now, on the medium budget, we are improving a few items. The low light version has a big jump from the low to medium budget because there are few items, but based on my recommendation to only do this if you're already making a ton of currency, should make it okay to do these upgrades. Because once you get these upgrades, you are very, very powerful, and the maximum version is optional. We want to upgrade our helm to an energy shield base that is synthesized with 15% increased aura effectiveness, and use an essence of loathing to get reservation efficiency on it, to balance out the lost reservation efficiency from Alpha Soul. Because we are losing the +2 from Alpha Soul, we need Ashes of the Star and a +1 Scepter, so that our Purity of Fire, Lightning, and Ice can give us the maximum amount of max res again. For our body armor, we want a Redeemer base that has, again, energy shield, obviously, because ES is survivability for us, and we already have a ton of armor evasion. We want it to have Redeemer influence to get increased aura effect, elevated prefer to up to 30. You can do an in-between stage where you just get a random Redeemer base, but you want to eventually end up on a 500 ES, 30% aura effect. On the top of that, a Rakener Orb with this Shaper basis to give +1 to int gems, which allows you to get an additional level on your on an Enlighten to have more preservation efficiency. On our belt, we can also try to fit energy shield and armor, but it's optional. We want to upgrade our shield to the Matu Otapu, however that's pronounced, to get more aura effect. We don't need the Prison Guardian anymore at this stage. And our rings should now get a bit of chaos breath, so we can drop the Amethyst Flask, and on top of that we can flip percentage energy shield, flat energy shield, and missing stats as needed. As for our flask, we want to drop the Amethyst Flask for Soulcatcher. Soulcatcher giving us more wall souls, or well, more souls, so we have more uptime on our wall skills, which be mainly as Discipline for survivability and Smite for damage. And on top of that, we have access to Wall Haste for a ton of movement speed and attack and cast speed for the carry. Wall Grace and Wall Molten Shell I recommend using because we can fit them in the gloves, but not actively using the wall versions because they aren't giving us that much compared to the other wall skills. And that brings us to the CI variant. CI is very similar to the low life version in terms of early gear. It's pretty much the same, just that we are using the Matu Otapu from the beginning to have aura effectiveness. We still use Alpha Soul, still use Victorious Influence, still use Jinx Juju, Syntrack, Volcaris, and Ephemeral Edge. On our rings, we don't need Chaos Res at any time because we are CI, so we can purely focus on stats and early on resistances in case your carry is not using Purity of Elements. And our belt, we can use a Baited Breath because we want percentage energy shield, there's discipline, and our aura effect is mainly giving us flat ES. Having access to more percentage is wonderful. On a medium budget, we are upgrading the same thing. We are upgrading the helmet to a synthesized base, and we are upgrading the body armor to reservation efficiency and preferred with +1 to int gems. And because of that upgrade again, we are recommended to use 21 auras, or we are recommended to use a +1 scepter, and then once we can ashes. Or we could also fit the purity of fire, lightning, and ice as impurities on the gloves to get the levels there, which allows us to further use the thermal edge if you want to do that. And the flask, we are again upgrading to a soul catcher, and the rings obviously again upgrading to more energy shield and percentage ES and stats as needed. Now in the high version, we aren't upgrading that much from either the low life medium or the CI medium. And from CI medium, we need an ashes and we need the belt with just high ES and percentage ES, influenced again with the Crusader, same as the rings. Or from the low life version, we already have pretty much everything, we just need to upgrade the belt. And then we can swap the flask. The main of the investment is going to be on the passive tree, which you can see in the passive building. Most of the cost is really just the jewels, the unique jewels, and the reservation clusters. And now that brings us to the leveling section, the final section of this guide. I already made a video with very detailed leveling that you can still use. This is just a quick compromised section that in case you need a refresher. We want to use Splitting Steel and Onslaught till level 4. Then we get access to Stormblast Mine, Swift Assembly. On level 8 we can add lightning damage. And we get access to Orb of Storms, Frostbomb, Onslaught. We can then use Frostblink, Frostbomb to kill enemies, or Stormblast Mine, Orb of Storms to kill enemies while we level. And once we level 12, we want to get Leap Slam level 10. We're going to use this level 12 or onwards when we swap to Scepters. Because I learned a really nice thing. It's a mobility trick. You could Leap Slam, Frostblink, like you did Flame Dash, Smoke Mine, Flame Dash in previous patches. They transition seamlessly into each other, so you can Leap Slam, Frostblink, then another Leap Slam again, for having just huge amount of mobility. And then not needing really a Flame Dash, because Leap Slam is just the same distance as Flame Dash, and Frostblink just works better with Leap Slam. And then finally our main leveling skill, Lightning Trap, with multiple traps, added lightning damage, starting at level 12. As for our passive tree, we are basically just running towards this trap node, having more trap damage. And on the further level, the next thing we want to get is projectile damage and a bit of life. And with that, we are basically set for leveling. At some point in Act 2, we're going to get Skitterbots. We're going to buy Habit of Thunder. Using those two auras, we're going to get Controlled Destruction, which we can replace Frost of Bomb with, which we don't need at that point anymore, so we can kill rares with our Orb of Storms Lightning Trap, and we get faster attacks which we can use with our Leap Slam. And at this point, if you're still using wands, do a wand recipe. If you're using Scepter already and Leap Slam, you can use a Scepter recipe. They work the same way as wand recipes. And we start to travel upwards to the first aura effect and preservation efficiency node. Up here, we're going to take this node, then we're going to soon get leadership and charisma as well. But in X3, we can also get trap and mine damage or elemental focus. From Act 2, then we have Falling, or we can take Grace and Wrath. And we can take Grace and Wrath, get a library at Generosity, which allows us starting at level 31 once we are on AURABOT swap. You have Smite, Wrath, or any offensive aura as a matter, and Generosity for damage, and Grace for survivability. And we can fill our rest of the section with the flex skills I've mentioned earlier. And the offensive skills you can either use or drop as needed. And that's pretty much everything there is. With that information, you should now be perfectly equipped as an AURABOT, either being the low life version or the CI version, And if there are any questions left, please feel free to ask. I'm trying to answer it as quick as possible, and I do read every comment on the video, and I read it in fairly timed manner. All that being said, have a wonderful day, and if you already enjoyed the video, maybe watch the other video which I will link over there. Goodbye!